Morning, everybody. Welcome to C3. I'm still getting used to this new Facebook profile, so please start leaving your comments if you're able to join. Tell me you're here, and we'll see if we can do this right. All right, it appears to be working. Let me go ahead and share it on my personal page, and we'll be off. Boy, this is not the easiest to navigate here, I'll tell you. I can't figure out how to share it now. Here we go. Okay. Hopefully that worked. Okay, it's 10:02. Time to start. C3, the virtual C3, West Michigan's inclusive spiritual community. I'm Kent Dobson. Thank you for joining us this morning. I've been doing a series during this crisis that I'm calling What Really Matters. And the sort of subtitle for today is Living the Question, or Living the Questions. And I'll say more about that in a few minutes. Before I get going, just a couple of housekeeping details. The first is, if you are a part of C3 or want to be a part of C3, we ordinarily meet in Grand Haven. And when this madness is done, we'll be back meeting in a live way on Sunday mornings in Grand Haven at the community center. But you can stay connected by signing up to receive our newsletter. And even if you're a regular part of C3 and you get the newsletter, please read it. It is the absolute best thing we have going for in terms of disseminating information and keeping you up to date on what's happening, particularly in a couple respects. First of all, just in terms of what we're offering Sunday morning, 10 a.m., which is what we're doing right now. As soon as I'm done talking, our guest musician will go live. Hopefully that will happen every single week. This week it's Kate Pillsbury from the Crane Wives, which I'm very excited to hear from. And it's actually just like an amazing, there's so much amazing creativity coming out of our local musicians and national musicians for that matter, in terms of being able to play music and be heard in this like sort of strange time of being confined. So join us right after this on the C3 page. I'll repost her live broadcast. What else do I want to say? Read the newsletter. I'm just repeating myself. Sign up to receive the newsletter. You can do so on our website. And we also have a section in our newsletter that is committed to what we call community care and concerns. So if you need something, or if you're the kind of person who would like to help any person in our community that might need something right now, please check the community care and concerns section of the newsletter for ways to get involved or ask for help. You don't know sometimes when you're going to need help until you need help. So in the newsletter, we have the contact, we have contacts and phone numbers and email addresses in case you're in a situation where you could really use something right now. And of course, we have plenty of people willing to step in and serve in that way. Let me say a couple of other things housekeeping wise. The flow of the week, 10 a.m. Sunday mornings, followed by music. Monday mornings, we'd like to have a kids message, which we've been putting on Facebook, so check it out. And Wednesdays is committed to our weekly meditation. Every single week, we have somebody from the communities get up and give a 3 to 5 minute meditation or personal meditation or reflection. And they're really, really worth watching. And we post those on Wednesdays about noon. They're not necessarily live. Some might be, some might not be. But that's a way to stay connected to the multiple voices of wisdom in our community. And then very, very exciting. We've had a lot of amazing guests at C3 over the years, and we contacted them and said, hey, what would it look like for you to offer just a short little message? They said yes, and we'll be posting those in days to come. Michael DeWile did the first one, so scroll down on the Facebook page if you want to hear his little personal message to C3, and there'll be more of that coming this week and in the following week. So I think that's it for housekeeping details. Other than donations, if you want to give a donation during this time or you feel like you're able to help us stay alive and keep doing what we're doing and be able to pay our musicians and our other expenses, which are still ongoing, even though we're not meeting in a live session, you can do that on our website. There should be a link in the comments too, if you want to use our PayPal donation. So I think that is enough housekeeping stuff. Let me return to something here. I want to begin with a short reading here from Rilke, one I've used before, and I think it keeps sort of ringing in my ears. So here's what Rilke says. He says, be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms, and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. The point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. So be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing, live along some distant day into the answer. So I apologize now. My friend Ted just sent me a text and said, hey, you paused your Instagram video. So sorry about that. I'm trying to figure out how to do like 3 things of technology in front of me. I have my computer, and I have my phone, which I'm using for Instagram, and I'm also have the readings that I wanted on my phone, and so I'm going back and forth. So if you're listening on Instagram, I was reading from a Rilke poem, and Rilke was saying, it wasn't a poem actually, it's a letter that he wrote to another poet. And he's basically saying that there comes a time when what is asked for is a deepening of the questions themselves rather than the answer. And I guess for some reason this sort of struck me this week because I don't know what your social media feed has been like or your news feed has been like, but I've been noticing all kinds of advice. And in a way, I've felt my own I don't know desire to try to offer something, as a teacher. It seems like everybody's sort of coming out of the woodwork with their advice and here's how to spend your time and here's what's important. And here I'm trying to ask the question in a series, what really matters? I've seen a lot of posts that are like, I don't know how to describe them exactly, but here's what we're doing right now during this, and it's really awesome. Like here we are really enjoying our family dinners or really enjoying nature or really enjoying quarantine. Look how well it's going. Of course, we know with social media that it's a kind of persona, kind of facade. Not that it's false exactly, but it's a kind of a mask, if you will. And I've seen other kinds of sort of "I told you so" posts from people, like I was prepared. I've been storing food in the basement. I've been warning people about infectious diseases. This doesn't change my worldview at all, in other words. And I don't know, I guess I told you so sorts of posts. Beth was saying in the comments, everyone is an advice monster. And I guess it's understandable in a way. I mean, we live, I guess, in an advice-oriented culture. But that's not what Rilke's talking about in this letter to a young poet. He's inviting the poet to live into the questions. Maybe along some shore, you might be able to live into the answers, but that is different than finding the answers. But living into them is what Rilke's talking about. And so, in a way, it just struck me, the title of the series that I'm working with online here is What Really Matters. And the reason why I want to ask such a question is because that I want to live into that kind of question. What really matters? Not come up with, 5 things that I already know really matter. And see, this crisis only confirms my worldview. And I don't have to change or be challenged in any way. I already know, and I'm here to bless you with my my knowledge, something like that. That's what I'm hearing in Rilke's question. And I think we live, I don't know, perhaps in a time where maybe more than ever, we're being asked to live more deeply into the question of what really matters. But if we start off saying, I don't know, I think we're on the right we're on the right track. I don't really know what really matters. And that's the kind of question that at least I feel like I'm being invited to live into. The other sort of phrase or word I've been thinking about this week, and maybe you have too, is the notion of initiation. And I don't know, in some respects, initiation, just as the word itself, even 10 years ago, really struck a chord. Maybe even 15 years ago for me, when I first started listening to Richard Rohr, who loves to talk about initiation. And there was something numinous about the word. Numinous means wink. It comes from I think Latin, which means to wink. In other words, the word kind of winks at you. It's like it has a kind of deep stream that is alluring and a little bit scary. And that's what the word initiation is and was like for me when I first encountered it. And of course, if you're a student of Joseph Campbell or religion or spiritualities around the world, you know that almost every culture, I mean, we can go ahead and say every culture that we know of, has some kind of initiation rite or initiation rites. And they're markers. They're markers of major transitions to go from one chapter of life, one phase of life, one immature expression of life. To be initiated is to go move across the threshold into some richer, more conscious, or you could even say it's a consciousness expansion initiation. It expands one's consciousness. And that process in ancient religions and spiritualities was considered to be sacred and powerful and disruptive and disorienting and also needed if we're going to grow up. You could even check, I made a podcast on initiation, I don't know, a couple of years ago. You could scroll through my own podcast, Hints and Guesses. I used Richard Rohr's stuff on initiation in that podcast. So anyway, I called it Stuff That Helps the Initiated Adult. So if you want a kind of a summary of Richard Rohr's work, that's a place to get it. Anyway, my main point was I've been thinking about this word initiation because it seems like it's personal on the one hand, and only you can grow up in a personal sense. Only you can move from a relatively unconscious worldview to a more conscious worldview. No one can do it for you, so that's personal, and also it's transpersonal. It's collective, and there are times and eras and moments, I suppose you could say, culturally, where it feels like we're in a kind of collective initiation, and that's what we're in at least in my humble opinion. We're in a kind of collective initiation, meaning how we viewed the world is being disrupted and challenged and like the rug has been pulled out. And it's not just one person or one group of people. We're experiencing it truly in a collective and global way. Maybe for the first time, perhaps in human history, we're experiencing a kind of global initiation. I mean, there were world wars, but it didn't affect every single corner of the globe. It affected the West. But now nobody is escaping this collective initiation. And it doesn't appear to have an end. It will end, part of us knows that because that's just basic science. But it doesn't appear to have an end that makes a lot of sense right now. We can't see it. And we don't even the sort of the idea that it goes in waves, which the experts have been hinting at. In other words, to flatten the curve and to have the curve come back up again, that is a frightening prospect, which means the kind of collective initiation passage that we're in might last for some time. And with that comes opportunity. I'm not celebrating it. I'm really not. I wish we were not in a collective initiation. I wish none of this was happening. I wish all of you health and safety and life and goodness, but it's happening. It's happening, and I wish it weren't so. But I don't know. I'm thinking again of Rilke. All right, so we're in this place. And what does it mean to live the question of what really matters now in the in-between, in the liminal threshold doorway space between having left one room, and that's what's happening collectively, and not yet knowing the future room we're being invited to enter. That's what I'm talking about. That's a kind of collective initiation. And by the way, I probably should mention this. The word initiation itself is Latin, and or it comes from Latin, and I think from the French to the Latin. Not that I'm like a linguist or something, but you too can look this stuff up. But it means beginning, which to me is a powerful wink. Back to my word numinous, a powerful wink that don't be fooled, that going through a personal and or collective initiation is not like the blinders coming off and suddenly we're enlightened and now we see clearly and it's all going to be fine and we'll get all this behind us and we'll get back to normal. That's not an initiation. Initiation means a beginning. And to have our worldview and our way of seeing things, to have our illusions die, that's, I think, D.H. Lawrence. Maybe I'll come back to that quote in a second if I can remember it. To have our illusions die is to begin again. Like St. Francis, let us begin again. Let us begin again. For up till now we've done nothing, he says to his disciples on his deathbed. So it's a beginning. And all I'm saying is to live the question is to not rush too quickly to the answer. I know what the answer is. I know how the economy should be restructured. I know how modern life should really be lived. I know now what I ought to now do for a living or whatever, just the quick answer. And we could say in modern psychological terms, it's the ego that seeks the answer. It's the ego that seeks the answer. It's also the ego that gives out answers and doles them out all the time. See, I know. See, I know. Only the ego is concerned about that kind of thing. Or you could say the persona, or maybe it's the ego persona. Persona is the mask the ego wears, meaning the face that it puts on to the outside world. That's the simplest way of understanding the word persona. But it's the persona and the ego that wants too quick of an answer. And I have to be honest with you right now. I am preaching, if that's what I'm doing, I'm preaching to myself. I really am. I'm saying, be patient. That's what Rilke is saying. Be patient now. Try to love the question itself. I'm trying to love the question, what really matters? Like a locked room, like a language I do not yet understand. I remember when I first moved to Israel, I was scared for a bunch of reasons. I mean, I moved to Israel when I had an 18-month-old daughter, and my wife and I moved there. And I remember the first couple nights we stayed in the student dorms. I went to two schools there. The first one I went to was called Jerusalem University College, and we got there a little early, and we stayed in the dorms and until we found an apartment. And I went to the library, which was like just down the hallway from the room that we were staying in, and I got a book on the Hebrew alphabet because I did not know Hebrew, and I knew I was going to have to learn at least a certain amount of Hebrew just to get a master's degree, just to pass my classes. And I remember looking through the alphabet and feeling a sense of dread and thinking, I'll never learn this. I mean, there's just no way. There's no way these symbols, these markings on a piece of paper are going to make sense to me. I remember feeling overwhelmed, like I had made a major mistake. And there are probably multiple reasons for that. But that's what I mean about loving the questions themselves like locked rooms, like a language that we haven't yet understood. And that's what it took. It took sort of falling in love with the mystery of not knowing just to put one foot in front of the other to learn enough Hebrew to, I don't know, read Genesis chapter 1. Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created. Much less go to the coffee shop and order a cappuccino, which is what I really wanted to do. So I don't know. What's my main point? My main point is be patient. Be patient. That's what Roka's saying. Be patient. Be patient with yourself. Try to love the not knowing. Try to love a question like what really matters. Know what really, really, really matters, and let it work on you. Because initiation, in the most general sense, is the process of being worked on. Again, the ego wants to work something out, and that has its own gifts, I suppose. But initiation is like being worked on, like being defeated. Like another Rilke poem, defeated by greater beings, he likes to say. So my main point is be patient. By the way, I woke up this morning and I realized by looking at the news, thank you very much, that it's Palm Sunday. And I have no idea what pastors and preachers and teachers in a traditional Christian setting are saying this morning. I have no idea. And I'm not here to judge in that sense. Like just engaging in the conversation with hurting and needy people is worth doing. But I thought about something specific with Palm Sunday. One of the mysteries about the way the story is told is that Jesus comes into Jerusalem. Everybody's all excited. They start saying, yeah, Hosanna, awesome, here comes the Messiah. And what's Jesus doing? He's weeping. He's weeping because people do not understand what is happening. And that image of Jesus weeping over misunderstanding is what struck me this morning. As soon as I realized, oh, it's Palm Sunday. It's the day when that mysterious, shrouded rabbi prophet of history who marched onto the scene of the Roman Empire in a tiny corner of the Roman Empire in Judea, as it was called at the time, this image of him entering the city of Jerusalem, weeping at misunderstanding. And he says, if you would have only known today what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. If you would have only known today, that's what he says, if you would have only known today what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes, and he's weeping. And I feel like in a collective sense, that's a little like what's needed. How have we been living? In this paper-thin global economy of resource extraction and a tiered class system, which is really what we have. And I'm talking on a global sense. And to see it for its thinness and the facade is like to experience a little of the misunderstanding the preciousness of life and the interconnected web in which we live. We live under the illusion of borders and of stability and of no matter what, I can do it. That's part of the American fantasy. And it's like living under illusion. And that's what's happening in Jerusalem. People are thinking one thing's going to happen. This is awesome. God's going to save us. And instead, no. That's not the story. That's not the story that's going to unfold over the course of the next week in the Christian calendar. So, I don't know. Some tears are in order for, I don't know, the ways that we've misunderstood who we are and how we've been living and how deeply interconnected we are, something like that. So maybe just a few more thoughts on on initiation here. Um, Another way of putting it, and I get this from Richard Rohr, he says that initiation is the experience of dying before we die. And what a lovely phrase. And I think what he means by that, in maybe in a psychological sense or a psycho-spiritual sense, is a bit of our own ego death. And the ego and the persona being the mask persona, and the ego, who we think we are and who we puff ourselves up to be, the story we've been telling ourselves, that thing has to die. And I don't know, in a way, experiencing the natural fears of a global pandemic forces us closer toward the experience of our own mortality, the thinness of our own human existence, which is, by the way, the first principle of Buddhism. Everything is impermanent. I keep repeating it in my teachings because it seems so relevant, as if it could go away as not being relevant. But nevertheless, everything is impermanent. And to come to a greater consciousness of the reality of our own mortality is like experiencing a death of our own ego, which thinks it's going to live forever. Like I said last week, I just thought of, I brought up Oasis in last week's teaching. We're going to live forever. That's a line from an Oasis song. We're going to live forever. And that's the story of the ego. And initiation, what Richard Rohr is saying, initiation is the death of that. And that's not pretty. That's not something you want to sign up for. Like, man, I'm really excited. I'm going to experience my ego death and move closer to my own mortality. But that is the process of becoming more conscious. It's like collectively we're experiencing what the story of Adam and Eve is meant to teach, that we begin in a kind of innocence, in a kind of paradise, in a kind of womb, in a kind of unconscious womb, where all of our needs are met and all of the trees are ours. But to grow up in consciousness is to realize that we are mortal, that we're going to die, that we're dust, that we're more complicated, and we can say one thing and act differently, or we're not as pretty and neat as we thought we once were. And as soon as we experience that shift, that initiation, we are kicked out. We're kicked out of the garden, so to speak. And it seems to me we're experiencing a bit of that collectively. We're being kicked out of the garden of our own illusions, of our own specialness, as if a virus cares if you're an American, or what kind of passport you have, or what kind of family heritage you have, or what kind of money you have, or what kind of 401k is now shrinking, or whatever. It simply doesn't. It's humbling. It's being kicked. It's like that. It's being east of Eden. And that's the place we're finding ourselves in. We're waking up to a greater consciousness east of Eden, you could say. And that is what, in part, a collective initiation seems to be offering. What is it like being kicked out of the garden of our own illusions? And I want to come back to Rilke. It says, don't be too quick to provide an answer. But he says, love the question. What would the question be? What's it like east of Eden? What's it like having our illusions taken from us? And now maybe is the time for the D.H. Lawrence quote. He says, we would rather be ruined than changed. We would rather be ruined than changed. We'd rather be ruined than changed. I think he's saying we'd rather cling to our illusions. All that I know. We'd rather be ruined than changed. And he goes on to say something like, to climb the cross and let our illusions die. I don't quite have the quote, Maybe I can look it up real quick. The beauty of the internet. All right, come on, baby, don't fail me. All right, here it is. Oh, yeah. Oh, this is even better than I thought. Jeez. He says, we would rather be ruined than changed. We would rather die in our dread than climb the cross of the moment and let our illusions die. That's the invitation. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I've been looking for. To let me say it again. We would rather be ruined than changed. We would rather die in our dread than climb the cross of the moment and let our illusions die. The cross of the moment, this moment that we're in, like collectively, that's what I'm talking about. What's it look like to climb that cross? That's what it feels like. And be worked by reality itself and not rush to too quick of an answer, but allow ourselves to be changed in this way, to be initiated, to be brought down into the underworld, to use old language, to be rearranged and dismantled, to enter the cocoon and have our cells be turned into soup, only to be rearranged into some form we cannot yet see, personally and collectively. But we resist such a thing. And I think D.H. Lawrence is saying, come on in. Climb the cross of the present moment. And the present moment is saying something like, you don't know. And I don't know. And to love that like a new language, to love that like a locked room, I think that's the invitation. So, friends, I want to end there. A few thoughts on what really matters, living the question itself or the questions. So, as always, I hope you heard something that challenges, inspires, pokes, winks at you, encourages you, a seed. Maybe not something I said, but maybe something that you caught in the wind of your own emerging awareness or in your own peripheral vision, to put it that way. I hope you'll trust that. I hope you'll trust that the great mystery of change and personal change and growth of consciousness is always at work, always, always, always at work. We can always grow. We can always grow in wholeness. Our consciousness can always expand a little bit more. Our ego can always die a mini death yet again. Not, I think, maybe so much for our own personal benefit, but to be of some service in a world that is suffering. So that's my hope for you today. Let me look, see if there are any questions or comments. Few kind things in the comment section. I appreciate it. Yeah, I hear with from when we return to the better versus when we return to normal. I'm not exactly sure what he means. That's such an interesting way of putting it. I like the phrase, we return to the better. I guess that's part of the hope. Yeah. Because and a return, we want to return to something better. What's the status quo? The status quo in part is how we got here. And yeah, and that requires a certain amount of being worked, as I was saying before. Tim Cusack says on Instagram, thanks for getting your ass out of bed and going to work. You're welcome. So Someone is saying, can you do a quick recap of levels of consciousness? No, I cannot. Um, it depends on who you ask. Jung has 5 levels of consciousness, plus he says there's a 6 and 7, which I can't say much about. Wilber has his levels of consciousness. That's my go-to person, Ken Wilber, when it comes to that stuff. Richard Rohr has levels of consciousness that he works with. All of those, I think, are good resources. But I'm glad someone asked such a question, because part of what we're being invited to is a greater expansion of consciousness, which can look like stages and levels. But that's another question for another time. But good seed to plant. So I think I'm going to end, and I appreciate all of you, and stay safe, stay smart, be courageous, be of heart during I think difficult, trying time that there's a fair amount of grief and tears and suffering, and that is part of it. So I wish you all the very best. Peace. Hang in there for Kate. She's coming up next. Peace.